All right, everybody. Welcome back to the Steelers Breakdown Podcast. Nick Farabaugh here with you guys. I want to talk a little bit about OTAs today. Obviously, the background's a little bit different. Not in Pittsburgh, on a little bit of a fun weekend trip this week. So, going to be out this weekend, but we'll be back Monday, of course. Let's talk a little bit, though, about Steelers OTAs. We got into this a little bit yesterday when we talked about just kind of their standouts and that we named three standouts there. I also want to kind of highlight a few more standouts and some things that I noticed. First of all, we've kind of talked about this, but the importance of OTAs for veterans is not paramount, right? If you are Cam Hayward or Patrick Queen, you don't actually get that much out of an OTA session. If you, however, are Kaleb Johnson or Derek Harmon, you get way more out of it. And the reason having those vets there is actually useful when you do have them there is for those guys. And so the Steelers had Cam Hayward there. They had Jalen Warren there. They had Alex Highsmith there, even though TJ Watt wasn't there. And so all of these guys actually ended up getting nice veteran mentors. And I thought that was really one of the key kind of things of the entire week, was Kaleb Johnson kind of taking to his mentorship with Jalen Warren and even Kenny Gainwell just about pass pro. I mean, this guy, you want to talk about a relentless worker in terms of wanting to fix a weakness. Kaleb Johnson really wants to have this problem fixed. He knows it's going to be the hurdle for him to play early, right? He's going to play on early downs, really, no matter what. There's no question about that. But more importantly, can you be a three down, really, really good player, right? Can you be the full package? Can you run the ball? Can you catch the ball? And can you pass protect? I think when we're talking about him, he can obviously catch the ball, I think, much better than people think. I thought that was on display this week in team drills in 11 on 11, 7 7. I thought he had really good hands. I think he's obviously a very talented runner, wide zone runner. We've talked about that many times, but I do think pass pro is something he just straight up wasn't asked to do. So there's a lot of kind of IDing protections, IDing the most dangerous rusher, hand usage, getting your hips through it rather than punching only with your arms. There's a lot of things that go into pass pro, and he's really taking to it. Jaylen Warren's so good at that. And so that's a really great mentorship. Derek Harmon is following around Cam Hayward like crazy. I thought that was a really encouraging sign. If you are a rookie and you have a guy like Cam Hayward there, you should want to follow them around. I remember Nick Herbig in his rookie season basically was like attached to the hip with TJ Watt. And that has showcased in his game. He's taken things from TJ, his ghost move, some of his speed rushes. And we're probably going to end up seeing Derek Harmon take some of what Cam Hayward does because they're so interconnected and interlinked. I think that's really great. And so you see these veteran mentorships really blossom. And I think the Steelers have two really good ones right there with their first two draft picks this year. The other thing I really wanted to note was Roman Wilson. I mean, if you're doing a winners and losers list for this week, and listen, winners and losers, the first week of OTAs doesn't matter much. It's 3 days in the spring, and they're only in helmets, they're not in pads, and there's so much to go by. And, if you think this stuff matters that much, it doesn't. You're just kind of trying to get an indication of guys who may be players and guys to watch. But I'll tell you what, when you look at Roman Wilson this week, this guy was really good. Um, he looked fluid in and out of his breaks. He can maintain his acceleration in and out of his breaks. We've talked about kind of his chief trait, right? Is that elite instant explosion, is that acceleration. Before, he would kind of lose that going in and out of his breaks. He would be less than efficient with his footwork. Here, he looks way more efficient. I think that's really good. He looks fully healthy. I think that's obviously the first thing you kind of have to meet when you were talking about a guy that's coming off the season he did. He's got to stay healthy. But this is a player, man, that really had a great week. There was one rep where it was an out route against BD Bishop, just cooked him off the line of scrimmage and won. And then as he caught the ball, just took his ankles. I mean, it was really impressive. And there were a few of those this week where he made tough grabs or made flashy plays that you would think so in space. And that's good for Roman Wilson. It's a good start at least. We'll see how this progresses, but good start to his campaign to potentially be a player in this offense. And I think he's a really intriguing player with his tools, but we'll see. I think anyone that is skeptical is reasonably skeptical. I'm still skeptical, but first week, at least a good sign. The other thing I really noticed the team as a whole doing, communication on the offensive line and in the secondary. I think that was a big thing for them this week. And it's not surprising. In terms of the spring, you're building kind of basics, right? Routine things. But the Steelers, after last year, when we saw down the stretch, just blow coverage after coverage. And it probably went under talked about, but on the offensive line, blowing protections and letting free rushers through, doing the wrong thing on the wrong play, like just meticulously repping different types of plays, knowing your play, communication on this push call, um, kind of if you're sliding this way, you get this guy. If he goes here, like all of these basic things, it's a spring thing. And by the middle of training camp, usually you should have these down. It doesn't matter how new the guys are. By then, you should have it down because you've worked together for so long and you can organize off-season workouts. And that is important to note when we are talking about kind of getting this thing on the right path. And the Steelers have really focused on communication. The bigger thing that they've really focused on is learning each other's nonverbal body language. I think that's a really important thing when you're talking about this because if I'm a free safety and you're all the way out on the field side and I can't see, I really am gonna have to like scream over fans, especially if you're on the road. You got to have a nonverbal cue. You got to understand what this guy means when he does this. All these nonverbal body language cues, really important to understanding calls so you don't get mixed up. I thought there was a lack of understanding of how guys communicated last year, which was quite odd because it wasn't drastically different. Now there were guys that were hurt in and out of the lineup, but you should know what their kind of body cues are and how their nonverbal cues are. So I think that's been an underrated part of kind of understanding this and just making sure these things don't happen again because they were good with communication for the most part earlier in the year. It was later in the year. It was very odd. But it seems like they didn't really understand each other's nonverbal body cues. And so something to note. So they are working heavily on that. On the offensive line, it's just kind of having your head in the game. Broderick Jones, for example, talking about that, knowing the playbook, flipping from right to left, because things do change, obviously. Important year for Broderick Jones, but he's going to be the one that needs to clean that up the most. But everybody obviously needs to have that in their arsenal. Um, Will Howard said he had a rough first day. I'd agree with that. The footwork was a little bit all over the place this week, but he's a rookie. Um, Rookie quarterbacks are like notoriously going to struggle. So anyone that comes to me and is like, how concerned are you with the start of Will Howard? Basically not. Because he didn't have a great week. And, there were some stats floating around that were just straight up fake. They're not real. But this guy he's smart. He's willing to learn. He's got the right mental disposition, I think, to kind of improve. But what I'm watching for this week isn't what I'm watching for every week. When you look at quarterbacks, specifically a quarterback that was drafted on day three, like Will Howard, you should expect them to struggle. And he's all been all about timing, right? His resurgence essentially with Ohio State was all about his timing and his footwork. When he played his best during the college football playoff run, he was on time and he wasn't late. When he's at his worst, like in the Michigan game, it was his footwork that was causing him to be off rhythm. And here's the thing. The Steelers really are gonna switch things around times on the back end, especially as they experiment in practice. Howard's going to have to kind of learn that this stuff is going to be really fast. It's different, even the highest levels of football at the college level. It's just faster. So Pittsburgh really does have a way of challenging their quarterbacks. I think in practices they kind of Minka does everything he does and moving around. So Howard is a guy that is going to have to let the game slow down for him. But I'm not watching for that in week one. It's going to be fast for him. What I'm watching for is for final week of training camp for him to look better, right? For him to have that slower game come to him. And so you're just looking for the gradual progression. And I thought we saw some signs that things were already getting better. So um, we'll see how that goes. But people are talking about Will Howard. I get a lot of people asking me about Rock Taylor. There's a video on Steelers Now YouTube channel. My friend Alan Saunders, put this up. Rock Taylor was off to the side working. Usually means he's injured. So not a lot to talk about with Rock Taylor this week. We'll see next week if he's back. So that'll be something to note. And then one final thing I kind of wanted to touch on, specifically on the defensive side of the football. Cole Holcomb. We're talking about a guy coming off major knee surgery and a major knee injury. And he looks good. There's a chip to his shoulder, I think. He's violent. Like the pads and the sleds that he contacts just move in a different way. Like he has a fervor for being back on the football field. I think it's contagious to see. He's smiling all the time. And Cole, if you knew Cole before the injury, he's not really a guy that's like giddy and smiles a lot, but you could tell there's just joy in his eyes, joy in the way he's playing. The fact that he's even out there in an 11 on 11 drill, it means a lot to him. And I think, he's looking solid. He can move laterally. He's still got the movement skills. I'm not sure if he has completely pre-injury movement skills back yet. But there's things there for Cole Holcomb. He's a little bulked up too, from what it looks like to me. His upper body's bigger than what it was when he was playing last. So maybe more of a run stuffer now in terms of his archetype. Kind of more of a burning hammer coming down, I would say, in that regard. So Cole Holcomb to me, really, really good story, of course. We'll see where it goes, but I could just tell from the emotions he's really happy to be back and showcasing some impressive power out there in that linebacker room as well. Peyton Wilson's a little bulkier. I think he's up to 243, he said. It's the heaviest he's ever been, apparently. So we'll see how that works out for Peyton Wilson, too. Something to watch in that linebacker room. All right, folks, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn on the notification bell for more. Thanks for watching. Be back on Monday.